Hello everybody and welcome to a little video where I'm going to talk about Civilization. Obviously the game in the background is Civilization 6, just some footage I took making a new game with Egypt, but I want to talk about it because I'm really big into Civilization and 4X games, and I always have been. I like space 4X games a little bit more. Like Endless Space is probably more up my alley. Stellaris is more up my alley, but I've always been a really big Civilization fan for a few reasons. One is that it covers like real world scenarios where you're dealing with nukes and stuff, and I like that. I like that there's some way to apply it to what we already know. But when Beyond Earth came out, I was really excited for it because I was like, oh, it's perfect. It's like Civ in space. They've made Civilization with a sci-fi skin. And many of you probably remember Six Pounder and I, when it came out, we're going to do a series on Beyond Earth, and that never panned out. I got a lot of questions as to why, and I never really answered them. It's just one of those, things that happen where I've got so many other series going on, and people ask like, "Oh, why didn't you do that one?" And I just never get around to responding. But the reason is pretty simple. It's that the game was bad, and Six and I played it for a bit and then never really gone into it, and that's the reason. And then that game became much better once the Rising Tide expansion launched, and I did play that a lot, and it was actually a lot more fun. I hearken it to when Gods and Kings came out for Civ 5. It made the game way more playable. It added a lot more features that were missing and should have been there from the start. And that's been a theme for Civilization over the years. They are basically making a game that is then missing features. And I'm not saying like they're doing it on purpose. There's plenty of development reasons of why something is missing features. Sometimes it's just time. Time. It takes time to develop a religion system in a game, and you may just not have that time to do it before the game actually is about to launch. You're, as a developer, you're having to worry, especially a developer like Firaxis answering to 2K. You're having to answer to publishers who want the game out by a certain time and are paying you to do that. So then you have some pressure on that, and that's the reason why things just don't get into games. It's not that they're purposely leaving them out. That said, in Civ 5, they kind of continued the tradition, and in Beyond Earth, they continued the tradition of things not being there at launch and them adding it in a patch or an expansion later on, and that making the game much better and much more playable. When Civ 5 launched, it was not as good as Civilization 4, and many people continued to play Civilization 4 until Gods and Kings and Brave New World launched on Civilization 5, which means Civ 5 was then the definitive game. So many people, after seeing the launch of Beyond Earth and Rising Tide and everything, were like, okay, well, that's going to be the case for Civilization 6. But as it turns out, that is not the case. And I can say happily that Civilization 6 is very, very, very good. After have been I've got like a stupid amount of hours. Let me pull up Steam and the game just launched. I probably should point that out. I already have 20 hours into the game. I've finished one standard speed game, and I've played several others, kind of trying out different civs, and I've started a couple multiplayer games at this rate. So I am, pretty far into playing the game. I have finished a game. I've seen the different victory conditions and everything. So I can pretty firmly say that this one is the best civ to launch for a long time, if not at all. It's hard to say that because I didn't play Civ 3 at launch or Civ 2, and I had only played Civ 1 briefly because a friend had it and I remember playing it. But this isn't something that I can like definitively say, but it is something that is really important over the past few games. I can compare that to Civ 5 and Beyond Earth and Civ 4 and stuff, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt that this one is the best performing game at launch with as far as content is concerned, and performance. I think I should probably mention that. We'll talk about the art style in a minute here, but I think the best part of this game is it has all of the Civ 5 features. You have religion, you have the diplomatic stuff, you've got all of the different new ways of creating cities, and we'll talk about that. So I think it's important to mention that this game is also the most radically different Civ game, despite it just being Civ 5 but better. You know, they didn't go way crazy in a lot of situations with new content added, or adding old content that they've already had, you know, such as the way that you create cities and tile sets and stuff like that. They're all pretty similar to what you would expect from Civ 5, but it's within those that they change it up massively. For example, when you build a city, normally in Civ 5, you would build everything in the main city, and all of your wonders and stuff would be like in the city itself, and you would upgrade the tiles around it, but the tiles would be more of a tertiary thing. You would have builders that you would oftentimes just automate to do it, and this is the same for Beyond Earth. They would just automate the system and kind of do whatever upgrades they wanted to. There is often some other times, though, that you would want very specific things to happen on the tiles around your city, you know, in a very specific order. So you would kind of control that. But more often than not, just automating your workers worked well. That's not the case here, because you have a couple different things at play. Workers now have charges. So you build a worker, and then it has like 3 charges to build things, and then it disappears. It expends the worker. So you're using the worker to instantly put tiles upgrades down, such as, you know, a farm for cows or a plantation for tea and coffee and stuff like that. But then you also are clearing things, like you can clear a forest, and you can clear, you know, swampland and stuff like that with it, and it would take those charges up. Workers can also be used to repair, you know, anything that has been pillaged on any of your tiles. But with that in mind, it goes hand in hand with the new city system, that things aren't just being built in your city center. That's what they call it in Civ 6. There are some things like sewers and a granary. Why can't I say that word? You know what I'm trying to say. But there are also districts that you build. So you will build like a holy site or an amphitheater, and those districts where you put them down on a tile get bonuses from the tiles around it. For example, a trade center, like a commerce center, will get a bonus for being on a river, but also for being on a worked ocean tile. So there's like this really cool system, and it's really deep. I have barely touched the surface of it, but to optimize like this commerce center, you put your city down on the tile next to a river funneling into the ocean, and you hope that there is a tile on the ocean to work right next to that, because then you're getting the bonuses from the commerce from being across the river on the same ocean set. So both of you are touching the ocean, and then you put down a harbor next to the ocean tile that is going to be worked. So the harbor is getting benefits from the ocean tile working. The harbor then gives bonuses to the commerce center up on land. The commerce center is then getting bonuses from your city, which is across the river, which is then giving more bonuses to your commerce center. So you're placing them in very specific areas to upgrade whatever district you're putting down, to the point where things can get really, really out of hand with how many bonuses you're giving them. And this goes for everything. There's also like war camps that you can put down, and when you train units, that's where they come out of, but it makes sure that it can help defend your city, because it can attack and has its own defenses and stuff, like camps, but that's its own district. And then you can also, you know, upgrade neighborhoods and put down more housing, because housing is this thing that you have to worry about now. As your city gains population, if it gets to the housing limit, it will no longer really grow, and people will start leaving your city because you need housing. And all of this funnels into the new happiness system, which is no longer a global happiness, which, by the way, sucked in Civ 5. It's no longer that case. It's individual city happiness, and that comes from how much housing you have, how many amenities you have, how well you're kind of keeping it up. And that where you place the housing down is important. You know, if you place it on a beach, people are going to be a lot more happy than if you placed it down in the middle of a jungle. And it's just a cool, very in-depth system that I have barely scratched the surface on, that completely changes the way that you play Civilization. And I love that. I love that about this game. But that's not the only thing they have changed. They've gone back to the tech tree of the normal tech tree from Beyond Earth. Beyond Earth's tech tree was a mess, and it was trying to duplicate the tech tree from Endless Space, but that tree was actually well set out, whereas the Beyond Earth tech tree, you just couldn't read it. This has gone back to the linear tech tree from Civ 5, and they've also added a second tech tree, which is all of your civics. Now, that said, it is a very similar tech tree to your research, as in it goes from the left to the right. There's many options along the way, but the way it works is in Civ 5, your civics were like a skill tree that you can choose from. So you could go down like tradition, for example, or commerce, and those would have several points in them, and they would give you bonuses that way. The way the civics work in Civ 6 is you go linearly across this tech tree, but you're picking up the ones that you want. And there's like some ones for, more of a warrior nation or more things for a theocracy, and you're picking these up and getting the bonuses from them. And then you open up what policies you have, and you put policies into place. So you have like these cards. It's a card system, and you're pushing these policies in that you want at the moment and that are going to be most useful for you in the moment. For example, at the start of the game, you have a policy that you can either have 1 gold and 1 faith in your main city, just like straight off the bat, or you can have 1% production in your cities. And that can make a big difference in what you decide to do. Are you trying to make more warriors and more archers? Then the production is probably more useful than the 1 faith and 1 gold, though the gold obviously helps for cost of maintenance on your units. But having that faith means that you can get an early religion, and then you can go with that. So it's this really cool system where it now adds way more depth to the civics. And as you even get further into that, you're choosing governments. Are you a monarchy? Are you democratic? Are you democracy? Are you a theocracy, which is really cool. And you go through this through different ages, and you get different government styles. So yeah, you may start as a monarchy, or you get to a monarchy, but later on you become a dictatorship. That's a thing that you can do, and you are encouraged to switch your governments as you go, because they give you different bonuses on that. And speaking of trees, all of the promotions for units make more sense now. There is a promotion tree that you go down. That comes from the stuff that they did in Beyond Earth, which just makes sense because that worked really well. Other things that worked in Beyond Earth that they ported over, such as the spy system. Spies are no longer, you just put them in a city and forget them. Basically, this time around, just like in Beyond Earth, you put them in a city and you put them on a mission. So you say like, create a spy network, and then that will make your other missions more capable of happening. And then eventually you get to the point where, you can siphon knowledge of their tech tree and stuff if they're further in tech than you, and gain a research thing, which is something you could do before. Or you could just like siphon money out of their commerce section, or sabotage things so then they have to repair them. And spies are really annoying to deal with when you're on the opposite end of that. But you can capture spies, and then you have them in your custody. And like the AI, for example, will trade you a ton of stuff and ask for their spy back. And you can either say, yeah, sure, whatever, or you can be like, no, you have to build another spy. I'm sorry, this one is mine. But if you're on the opposite end of that, if you're having the spy get caught, you have a chance of getting your spy away. And like the way they can get away is they can just run, they can try to take a vehicle, they can have a boat chase and stuff. And it's this cool theming across the spies that make more sense. But in the end, it's all stuff that they pretty much ported over from Beyond Earth. That worked really well. As far as combat is concerned, all units at a certain rate. So when you get to closer to the modern era, you can start making units. So you can put units on top of units. Or what I meant by that is like a corpse. You can make like a core and put units together. So then it's 2 units fighting as one, and that can go up to like 3 and 4 in some cases. And you could put your generals on top of that and upgrade them. And great people all have expenditures. So if you get a great artist, you can take them over to your amenities district that you put down, and you can have them create like a great work of art. And then that work of art is there in your city and you can see the bonuses it gives you. Oftentimes it's cultural, sometimes it's not. Like, you can find the Holy Grail. It's these really cool little things that add up to making the game a lot better as far as a gameplay in depth of strategy. That said, I think that the game, from that aspect alone, is now worth it. It's no longer the situation where you're waiting a year down the line to get an expansion or two to make the game better. I think the game is worth it to play at launch because it is a better version of Civ 5, in my opinion. They've gotten rid of some of the fluff that didn't need to be there or was really confusing to begin with, and they just added a lot more depth of strategy. And it means that multiplayer games are going to be a lot more fun, and I'm kind of curious to see what that's going to be like, especially because nukes are way more powerful. Nukes will instantly destroy a city, so it'll take it from 100% life down to 0 and kill any units in the adjacent tiles that you launch it onto. And there is no nuclear proliferation from what I can tell, so it's more like a Cold War situation multiplayer-wise, where you have a nuke and you can threaten to use it, but the other player may also have a nuke. So it's this standoff of like, you don't want to use it because you know how terrible it is to use, but at the same time, you may just use it to destroy a city instantly, run a unit in right afterwards and capture that city, and now it's yours. But that city is going to be at low HP and easily capturable again. So you got to be kind of careful with that, and your unit's going to take damage, obviously, from radiation. So there's some interesting things at play there. But let's just briefly touch on the aesthetic of the game, because I know when it was first announced, people hated it, which makes no sense to me. I also was kind of like, it looks more like a free-to-play Civ game, like they came out with. Was it an Age of Wonders game, or I was pretty sure it was a free-to-play Civ game they came out with. But it looked very similar, this kind of clay art style on, each of their units and buildings and stuff. And the more that I play it, the more I like it more than the old one, especially the map in the Fog of War. So you'll see as I'm playing that there is like this map texture as the Fog of War, but as you reveal things, it draws it in. So then it kind of like is drawing a map of the world. So far, I have had very few issues reading that, now that I'm kind of more used to the art style. And what I mean by that is like being able to pick certain things out of the map and know what I'm looking at. But at first, it was like a case of what the heck is that? I can't tell. And you have to hover over it and kind of figure out that way when it pops up like the land information there. But as far as readability, it's way better than Beyond Earth ever was, and I can appreciate that. I think the game is really pretty, and most importantly, it runs really, really well. When you get into the end, like portions of Civ 5, even if you have a good computer, there's chances you're going to be running at like 40 frames per second in a lot of like large scale battles and stuff, and it's just like, oh, come on, this sucks. Civ 6 thus far has been running at about 200 frames per second for me in large battles. It's dropped. My lowest I've seen it is 70, and I can appreciate that. That is really awesome. But the aesthetic in general is way better, and I think if they progress down this line and make it, a little bit better in the future with different games, but kind of keep this idea that they have, I like it. I know a lot of people don't, but at the same time, it's more of a personal preference thing. So with that said, I think I've pretty much covered everything I can say about the game. It's got more depth. It's way more strategic. I think multiplayer is going to be more fun. And they have a game that they've launched that is good at launch, and you don't have to wait a year to get an expansion. If you are looking for another Civ game like Civ 5, this is for you. If you don't want another Civ 5 and you're looking for something a bit more crazy, go get the Endless Space 2 game, the early access game for that, because that is actually pretty good. But it's another Civ 5, just well improved, and I think that that speaks wonders to the game itself. So with that being said, I have nothing else to say on it. It's a good game. Pick it up. I really enjoy it, and you probably will too, and you probably won't regret it. You'll know within the first like 2 hours whether or not you'll regret it, and if that's the case, wait for an expansion. It'll probably make it better for you. After I just get done saying that the game is good without an expansion. We shall see you guys next time.